Thank you for being here, and if you are here online, especially thank you. I will ask that one thing that in my classes, I enjoy comments. I enjoy hearing from you. I don't want to be the only one doing the talking. But they do have one issue with that since we're going to be online. And that is, if you say something, one, you need to speak up. Two, if you don't mind, at some point, I may paraphrase what you say so that just in case the rest of us hear it just fine, those out in our other audience online will hear what's being said as well. And if I mess up and paraphrase you wrong, please correct me. It won't hurt my feelings at all because I want to get it right. Okay. Before we get started, let's start with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful for you sending your Son to die for us. Father, we thank you for the guidance that we have from your word. We ask you tonight to help lead us to a better understanding of the things that you want us to know from your word so that we can live our lives in such a way that it'll be a blessing to you and be able to spread the gospel to others. Guide us through all we do, Father. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. All right. Let me begin this by putting things this way. What a year we've had, right? You realize it was about a year ago when we had to go essentially into quarantine. Most of you remember that all too well. So we've been at this idea of this, with this virus for about a year now, maybe a little bit over. And not only that, but let's look at some other things that's happened in this year's period of time. We've had the pandemic. We've had, this is in our country in general, we've had riots. We've had an election that didn't exactly go real smooth. I mean, that's a polite way of putting it. We've had, just a plethora of other things that have kind of gone wrong in our lives and so forth. We've had situations where we've had some of our own that have been very sick. We've had some where we've lost some of our own, thanks to the pandemic. So here's what I thought we would look at. We're going to look at a specific character of the Old Testament that went through an awful lot of trials himself. Went through a lot of bad stuff. And we're going to kind of see if we can draw some lessons from what he went through. Anybody want to guess who I might be talking about? Job, yep. So if you want to, you can go ahead and turn to the book of Job because we're going to be spending a lot of time there. I made a few references other than that to some other places, but that's where we're going to spend most of our time. I've been given tonight and next Wednesday night. I think I can get it covered in that length of time. But I strongly encourage, as I said a moment ago before we actually kind of got officially started, I like your comments. I want to hear from you. There's going to be times I'm going to ask some questions and I'm patient. I'll wait for an answer. I won't just keep talking. Remember, I was a teacher for a long time, professionally. So that's not an issue with me. All right. We're going to look at some and hopefully gain some lessons from Job. The first lesson I want us to get kind of is put into perspective at the beginning of Job. And that was the idea that God knows. Let me put it this way. When bad things happen to you, How many of you have ever felt alone? You don't have to raise your hands. That's probably going to be the majority of us. And at some point, it's almost like, does anybody out there know what's going on with me? Does anybody know what I'm going through? Okay? Let's look at Luke chapter 12 for just a moment. And we'll see what the Bible has to say about, God knowing what's going on. Luke chapter 12, verses 6 and 7. And it says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 cents? Yet not one of them is forgotten before God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear. You are more valuable than many sparrows." We use that scripture to help remind us that God's counted every hair on your head. He knows what you're thinking. He knows what's going on. But what I want to keep in mind tonight is He does know. He knows when you go through some bad times. He knows when things are bothering you. He knows when things are not going your way. He knows. Now, let's look at Job for just a minute. I'm going to just kind of paraphrase as part of chapters 1 and 2. But we know the story at the beginning of Job. We're introduced to Job, who has many children. He has many animals. He has, he's very well off. Let me just put it that way. Job is a good man. He's done well. God's blessed him very well. But then we have something happen with Job that he was totally unaware of. Because we have a conversation that gets started between Satan and God. Somebody tell me a little bit about that conversation between the two. What was this conversation about? A challenge, okay. What kind of challenge? Okay, very good. Satan claimed what? About, let me just, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. In chapter 1, verse 8, we notice something that sometimes we don't think about too much, but at least I haven't thought about it this way. Satan has come to him and he's talking about what he's been going to and fro on the earth and so forth. And God says to him in verse 8, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" I want you to look at that short little phrase, "my servant Job." Out of all the people on earth at that particular time, and there probably wasn't quite as few as there are now, but of all the people on earth, God knew Job by name. He knew what he had. He knew what his service was to him. He knew him. So what does that do to our confidence of knowing that God knows what we're going through? Should help a great deal. God knew who Job was. Then what happens is we see that he tells Satan, he basically turns Satan loose. And we'll get to some of that stuff in just a little bit here. But the fact is, he knew Job. He knew he was a faithful servant. Now, I got a question that hopefully will, I don't know whether we've thought about looking this way or not. Jesus, being God's Son, God also himself, we know he came to earth. I got a question for you. What were the reasons he came to earth? And I say reasons because there was more than one. What were the reasons he came to earth? Remember, I'm patient. I'll wait. What were the reasons Jesus came to earth? Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. I agree with both of those. There's a third reason. To serve. Okay, there's a fourth reason. What could be something else? Example? That's part of what I'm thinking of. That's true too. There's still another one. Yes, he did come to crush Satan's head and win the victory. But there's another reason. Say that again, please. Oh, you're getting very close. Said, well, to live as we live. All right, let me help you out. Okay? Go to Hebrews chapter 4. Hebrews chapter 4. Because there was another reason that Jesus came. All the stuff that you've talked about so far was all exactly right. Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Therefore let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So it was another reason that Jesus came. Come on, what basically I just said? To go through everything we go through. To be able to sympathize. Think about this. We see this happen in some companies, and in my case, it was my boss being the principal. But anyway, never mind. I won't talk about that. Is there ever a situation when those that are in power lose touch or lose their understanding of what those underneath them go through? Oh yeah, definitely. I had one of those principals, hadn't been in the classroom in a long time. He really didn't understand what actually went on in the classroom. And from what I understood later, he'd only actually been in the classroom for like 4 or 5 years before he became a principal. Unlike some of us who stayed there a lot longer than that. I won't say how many, but anyway. Think about it. God, he created us. He knows the hairs on our head. But before he sent his son, or himself out actually down here to live amongst us, as they would say, how could he really understand how we deal with things? Not till he'd done it himself. That's exactly right. You really don't understand what somebody's going through unless you've been through it yourself. One of the first things they taught me in counseling classes was, don't ever say, I know what you're going through. Because the answer to that is, no, you don't. Especially if you're a young person who's trying to deal with somebody who's been through something, you have no clue what they've been through. Jesus came here so that he'd be able to speak to the Father on our behalf, because he can say to the Father, I know exactly what they're going through. Been there, done that. Isn't that true? Now, how does that make you feel knowing that you got somebody speaking to the Father that understands you that well? It should make us feel pretty good. Okay? Now, I want us to look at something else that, before we get to our next point, otherwise I'm never going to get through all of these. I know I'm not. When we look at the account of Satan here, and especially if we go to chapter 2, go on, there we go. If you will, look in Job chapter 2. I'll make sure I get the right place here. Well, I'm just going to paraphrase because I don't see it exactly here, and I know I'll never get to some of the other stuff. Twice, Satan comes to God and talks about Job. The first time, what did God say you can do? You can test him, but what was the one exception? And we're going to talk more about that exception later. You can't touch him. Okay? Second time, Satan comes back and say again. Can't take his life. What argument does Satan give for wanting to be able to touch him? Yeah, if you, in other words, well, he's going to still follow you because we haven't touched him. He's not actually suffering. But if you make him suffer, what did Satan expect him to do? Curse God. That's going to be it. It's going to be all over with then. So Satan thought. Okay. But not only Satan. Satan ended up being disappointed, but it wasn't just Satan that was disappointed. Look at Job chapter 2, and let's look at verses 9 and 10. Now, remember the state Job is in by this point. He's not very well, is he? He's covered with probably boils. He is suffering from head to foot. He's lost all his family. He's lost his crop, his animals. He's lost pretty much everything. The only thing he's barely got is I started to say his health, but not really his health. He's only got his life. That's all he's really got left, except for his wife. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to have to talk about the wife for a second. So look at verse 9. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and what? Wait a minute. If your wife won't even support you, come on. Right? Curse God and die." But what does Job say? Most of us could probably quote this without any big problem at all. But then he said to her, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God? And shall we not accept adversity?" In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Yeah, we wouldn't have been in this state if we didn't run out. Anyway, never mind. I digress on that one. So, Did Satan get what he wanted? No, he didn't get what he wanted. Because he thought, sure, if you let me touch him, yeah, I know you said I can't kill him, but if you let me touch him, oh, he's going to curse you. He's not going to follow you anymore. He's going to follow me instead. He didn't do that. Not at all. Yeah. Yep. Satan had the same conversation with God about Peter. So he wanted to sift him. And, he wasn't going to have that.
No, I think this shows us a little difference between, your first point about Jesus sympathizing.
Mm-hmm.
I think this shows us how Satan is different than the Lord. Because Satan can't relate, can't sympathize the way the Lord can, because he didn't go through some of that.
Right.
In my thinking, anyway, what happened to my kids would have been way worse than anything you could do to me. But Satan didn't understand that, I don't think,
No.
because he's never been a father, never been down that road, never
No.
faced any of that. So I think that's a unique idea.
Yeah, it is. And it's very good. All right, so the first idea, the thing I want us to learn is that, God knows what's going on. Now, second thing I want us to notice, and to really get a grasp on this second part, let's look at chapter 1, Job chapter 1 again, because I want us to notice something else. Verse 12. All right, this is where Satan makes his first attempt to say he's going to get Job to follow him. Verse 12, and the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went from his presence, from the presence of the Lord. Here's the point. Did God limit what Satan could do? And was there a time limit? Okay, he did definitely. And we don't really see a time limit here. But here's what I want us to notice. Most of the trials and so forth that we go through, even ourselves, aren't they temporary? At the time you're going through it, you don't think they're temporary. I know that. They never are. But they're temporary. They don't last. Another thing they taught me in my counseling classes. A quick little phrase that is used when someone really gets very distressed is the idea that things that are happening to you right now are temporary. They don't last. But especially in situations where someone is thinking of taking their own life. Do not make a hasty decision that you can't change. Because think about it. Those bad things you're going through, typically, no matter how bad they are, is for a relatively short length of time. Or once you take your life, that's forever. Or something along those lines. So, the simple idea is, and even when we get to chapter 2, I'm jumping ahead of myself just a little bit here. In chapter 2, verse 6, same thing happens. So I'll just go ahead and go there so that I make sure follow all my notes here before I don't miss something. Same idea. He says, and the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So essentially, what I'm saying here is this. Who's in charge? Ultimately, who's in charge? Yes, thank you. That's exactly right. Satan had to come to God and ask him permission to do that. And did Satan back down or argue with God when he said, no, here's where your limits are? No, he didn't. He wasn't able to. This is very true. You know, and as I said at the beginning of this point, I know there's sometimes when you're going through stuff, you think it will never end. Especially if you've gone through some real big tragedy in your life. But it will end. Will things be the same later down the road? No, probably not. But it will get better. Even though it's hard to see that now. And always keep in mind who's in charge. It's just hard for us sometimes to fathom that idea. Another thing that goes along with this, and this gets to my next point. When we're going through all this stuff, do we ever ask ourselves, why? Do we ever question, why me? Sure we do. Pardon? We're taught? Okay, explain. Okay. So those that he loves, he's going to chasten, he's going to correct. Okay. Yeah, and we're going to get to a little bit later just about what you're talking about, John. That kind of a lesson. Yeah, it's one of those things that we want to say, why? We want, pardon? Oh yeah, I'm going to get to that too. Yeah, I'm going to get to that here in a little bit, and we're going to see just how much he gets to the idea of Job wondering why, and so forth. Okay. Next idea. Job wanted vindication. Bad stuff had been happening to him. And we all do. When bad stuff has happened to us, we want to know, how come? I thought I'd been living a good life. I thought I'd been doing what I was supposed to. So why are these things happening to me? He even had some friends. I'm going to put that in quotes, but anyway. He had some friends who come up to him and wanted to help him, didn't he? Ben's just shaking his head over here like, I do. We're going to look at a statement by some of those friends as we continue. Because there were three of them. They come and they sit with him, and they just sat with him for days without even saying anything to him. But then they do open their mouth, and anyway, sometimes we wonder why. But anyway, look at Job chapter 33. And rather than spend the time to read all of this, because it is a rather lengthy, I'm going to let you just kind of look at it, and I'm going to paraphrase some things here along here. Job chapter 33, verses 12 through 22. That's what I want you to look at. Now, let me set the stage a little bit for what's going on. Elihu essentially is trying to convince Job, you done something, Job. You've messed up somehow. There's bound to be something you've done that's caused God to afflict you like this. Look at verse 12. Behold, let me tell you, and now I want to come back to that, let me tell you in just a moment. You are not right in this. What Job had been saying just prior to this was, I've done everything he wants me to do. I've been the kind of person he wants me to be. I don't understand it. Well, Elihu says, oh, here's why. Okay. So he's telling Job, no, Job, you're not right. For God is greater than man. Now, let's go back to that, let me tell you. As you glance down through that, what's the scriptures that I gave you there, what is Elihu essentially trying to do, or what position is he trying to take? He's trying to be who? A little louder, please. Exactly. He's trying to be God. He's speaking for God. Yeah, they did. But in this case, Job's going, I know I haven't done anything. I've been faithful. And we're going to see a little later, he questions some things and so forth. But Elihu's trying to convince him, oh, you're wrong. You're bound to have done something. But Elihu is essentially speaking for God. Now I got a thought-provoking question. And this is open. There's no wrong answer here, okay? Have you ever known situations where someone basically tried to make themselves out to know more than God knew? Uh-oh, I heard a real quick yep. Give me examples. Without naming names or getting anybody in trouble. We don't want to do that. But what kind of situations? I can wait. Pardon? Yeah, they started in the Garden of Eden when Satan said, nah, that isn't what he really meant. Stan? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we see a lot of situations. We say in the grocery store, somebody's grabbing something, putting it in their purse because maybe they need it for their family or whatever. Okay? But a lot of times we'll know people, and we may have been guilty of doing it ourselves in some cases, of seeing something and we know how to fix that. Right? Oh yeah, we can tell you how to fix that. What about situations where, and again, I'm not going to mention any names here, the Bible says one thing, but then you hear the phrase, but I think, and you can follow that by all kinds of stuff, right? I know what it says. What's the next word? But when that happens, what are you doing? Yes. And you're speaking for who? You're speaking for God. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, God knows whether we're good or not good, and it's not our place to tell him how good or not good we think we are. Does that remind us of anybody from the New Testament? Yeah. A prayer by the Pharisee, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about the people, all his friends saying, you must have done something. Think, dude, think.
Yeah.
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 Like if it was us and it was, somebody, our neighbor, somebody, a member of this church, and like everything like that had just happened to them, I mean, we'd be like, what in the world is going on?
Yeah.
Because that's just crazy. So you've got to be like, something had to happen. That's what
Yeah, you had to do something.
the brain is going to think.
Well, some of it is like human nature. That we're human. So,
Yeah.
That's true.
So
Yeah, we are human.
Think that because if you really think about it, it was bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was
That's what I'm
bad.
saying.
Yeah.
His whole family's gone.
But
He's sick.
it goes back to how we open our mouths. We don't know the whole story.
Yep.
So leave it in God's hands.
Yep.
We don't know the whole story.
Yeah.
And they didn't. They didn't know the story.
So what Elihu is doing here, essentially, is he's saying, I know more about your situation. I know what God is thinking. Did Elihu know what he was thinking? No, he didn't know what he was thinking. Didn't have a clue. As we go on down through here, we're going to say, yeah, he really didn't have a clue. Okay? But we are told that if we don't understand something, to seek wisdom. Okay? Where are we supposed to get that wisdom? Yes. And I could probably ask Ben to quote this one. He could probably do it off the top of his head. James 1:5 says, yeah. He tells us if we want wisdom, if we want to be able to handle things in our life and do it in a wise way, listen to our neighbor. Right? Is that what he says? No. Ask that long, known buddy of yours that has never stepped foot in the church building at all what he should do. That's what you're supposed to do? No. He says in James, ask of God. And he'll give it to you. But you got to ask. And yeah, the answer, you're right. Sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes the answer could be yes, sometimes the answer is no, and sometimes the answer is just wait a little while. Or sometimes a long while. But ask. Pardon? The answer is, I'm sorry? More. More, okay. Sometimes the answer is more. Okay. But the trials are something that we're all going to go through. So the way to kind of look at this from here is view trials that we go through not as necessarily trying to figure out why, that ain't right, is it? Okay. I sure hadn't. I hadn't heard that in a long time. Well, let's see. I'm almost halfway through, so I might actually make it. But instead of asking why, ask the question is, how can I grow from this? Different way of looking at it.
Why doesn't it even matter?
Exactly right. You're very, very good. Why doesn't really matter? What matters is, what do we learn from it? Okay? Look in Hebrews chapter 5 for just a minute. I got a minute then. I got a feeling that 5 minutes is going to go by fast. Hebrews chapter 5. Look at verse 8. What I want you to notice is, nobody is exempt from this idea of learning from bad stuff. Although he was a son, this is referring to Jesus, he learned obedience from the things that he suffered. Even Jesus went through things so that he would learn. Not to say, why me, but to learn. Okay? And you know, sometimes, well, just turn to John chapter 15. Go ahead and turn there, and that way maybe I can get this point finished tonight. Sometimes the things we find out is that we need more than just simply to challenge ourselves or to look for something to learn. John chapter 15, verse 2. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. A lot of times we stop right there. Look at the rest of that verse. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so it may bear more fruit. It's hard, not something we would like to think about, but every once in a while, do we need pruning? Yeah, we do. I have as a hobby, some of you know about this hobby, I raise little miniature bonsai trees. And the only way I can keep those trees under control and make them actually look like little miniature versions of the big ones is to prune them big time. There's been a time or two, I thought, Trish can testify to this, I worried one time, I did one and I trimmed it so bad, I said, I know I've killed it. I know I'm about to kill that thing. Did I kill it? No. It came back looking better than it ever had looked before. Why? I pruned it. I got rid of the stuff it didn't need. So maybe sometimes the stuff we're going through is because it's God's way of pruning us. He's telling us there's stuff in your life you don't need. There's stuff you need to get rid of. And so I'm going to be here to help you get rid of it. So if we keep dwelling on the idea that we don't know why it's happening, why me, and we don't look at it as a way to grow, we won't figure that out. We won't understand the reason, which we may never actually understand the reason. Yes, they did, didn't they? When they came out of Egypt, they wanted to, and they made the mistake of even asking about going back to Egypt, and that wasn't a smart thing to do for them. Yep. So sometimes with the things we go through, not always, but sometimes the things we go through is because there's something we need to fix. Now next week, I'll just give you a heads up a little bit, because it looks like I may have to go a little faster next week. But anyway, we're going to find out that there was something in Job's life that he needed to fix. Now that sounds kind of odd when you say that at the very beginning, how did God describe Job to Satan? What did he say about him? None like him. Without fault. Blameless and an upright man. Now, does that sound like that there was anything that Job still needed? Plus he feared God. We're going to talk about something, though, there was still something that he needed to prune. So with that in mind, I'll let you think about that till next week. Thank you.